Good morning and welcome to another edition of Our Town on 94.9 and 99.1 The River. I'm Darren Swenson. Our Town, as always, brought to you by Decorah Bank and Trust. We'll get an update on the two area school districts on this morning's program. We'll talk to Decorah School Superintendent Mark Lane, as well as Allamakee School Superintendent Jay Mathis a little later on in the program. But we'll update you first on what's going on with the Iowa legislature, who began its work in Des Moines this week. A little earlier this week, we had a chance to sit down and talk to Mike Bergan, state representative from Dorchester. Mike joined us on Our Town. Having a conversation here with State Representative Mike Bergan, beginning his second term in Des Moines. And Mike, as we chat, the governor just gave her condition of the state address. What, in your mind, did you like about what Governor Reynolds had to say tonight?
Well, I've been impressed by the governor in her work in the past year. And as she came before us to talk about the condition of the state, she talked about the resilience of Iowans, the tenacity, the ability to reach out with compassion and work through the challenges of 2020. I agree with her in that we're in a good fiscal state on the state budget, and that we have an opportunity to not just return to normal, but to build a new normal, new opportunities and growth for Iowa.
And one of the things she brought up tonight was giving parents a choice on whether students should attend in classes as compared to remote online learning. And I know that's a delicate balance with the global pandemic going on. In your mind, where is that happy medium between the state telling parents that, hey, you should put your kids in school, and districts having the freedom to say, we're not comfortable doing that?
It is a challenge, and I think we're going to have to work through that. That's part of the legislative process. We have 100 representatives. There's 50 senators. We have to come together and find that balance in the process. There is not a bill out yet that's available with the language, and that's going to be a process. So we're going to spend some time on that. But certainly, we have some challenges, as I spoke with the Decorah Community School District relative to this topic of a responsibility to students and how do we find that balance. And our local school districts have struggled through to find their own solutions. They vary from district to district. It's not necessarily any of them are the right solution, but it's the best that we can do at this time. And as we learn more, gather some more information, see other examples that are working, we're going to get to a better level of our quality education for Iowans.
A lot has been made of the tone in politics nationally, especially since the events of 6 days ago in Washington, D.C. And I know some of that has trickled down to the state level, being the fact that it's so divisive nationally and it's trickling down to the state level. How does the Iowa legislature, in the limited time you have in Des Moines, rise above the fray and focus on working for the people and not the ugliness which national politics has become?
Well, I've said many times that in Iowa, we do not have the political division that we see on the national level or portrayed in the national news, that we have found ways to work together. And I've heard Leader Pritchard, a minority leader, comment on some of the suggestions that the governor's office offered today, where we do have agreement that we will move forward on together. And others will have some differences that we'll work through. But I feel safe here. There's an increased presence of the state police during this first week of activities, as a lot of it's ceremonial, but with maybe a concern about some of the tension that's reflected in Washington, that's maybe prevalent throughout the United States.
And you mentioned security at the state capitol building, and news coming out that state capitals could be a place where a lot of activity could take place between now and January 20th. For lawmakers, what's security like? What's security like to get into the building for the general public right now?
We haven't seen any specific change to that process. We do have Capitol guards. Their public comes through a metal detector device that's been in place for a number of years now in the process. And so I haven't seen a change or restriction of any means in that regard. Certainly with the COVID concerns and interaction, we see reduced traffic. I think people are choosing to stay home. We are implementing processes in our committees, subcommittees, to allow for some remote observation and in some parts interaction in some of the work that we're doing to help facilitate. Those processes are being tried on a temporary basis this week, and we expect to re-examine and adjust as we go forward in the next week or two.
Again, you walked into my next question. All the health and safety protocols that the state is telling the public to do right now, can you follow them as well as you can and get the work of the people done at the Capitol?
Well, I believe that we can. The governor's issued her orders across the state, and a set of example, but the governor's order does not apply to the legislature, as we're a separate branch of governance. In the same way, it does not apply to the judiciary. So in the judiciary, the Chief Justice of the courts has implemented rules for the court systems to follow. The House and Senate leadership is implementing rules for us to follow. And they're very much in line with what the governor has put into place. We're following recommendations that are available to us from Iowa Department of Public Health, from the CDC, those type of things, of social distancing, advised to wear masks when social distancing is not available, when exposure is expected to be 15 minutes or more. And I've seen, I think, higher than expected attendance to those recommendations. Those rules are not final. We've got a rulemaking committee that's in process of working on those rules, and so we're just operating off of some temporary rules with some recommendations, and the House and the Senate will act on their own chamber rules upcoming in the next week to 2 weeks.
And we'll emphasize Mike is by himself in the House chamber right now. That's why he is maskless, if anyone is wondering on this video. Looking at last year's session, things pretty much screeched to a halt in mid-March like the world did. And when you came back in June, you pretty much got the budget done, and that was going to be that. Was there anything left on the docket last year legislatively that you didn't get to that is going to be towards the top of the docket this year?
Oh, absolutely. We passed several things through the House that made it to the House chamber that did not get picked up in the Senate. Likewise, the Senate had some legislation they passed that we chose to leave until the next session. All of those measures died with the end of the General Assembly. We're starting all over, brand new, with bills being filed yesterday, being read in today into our calendar, and being assigned to committees. So we, of those, I see some issues consistent with what the governor's put forward, issues around broadband, issues around childcare, issues around mental health, that it's going to be at the forefront. Some of that we've worked through last session. We'll rework them through the process, I think, at an accelerated rate to move some of those issues forward.
And from a process perspective, you mentioned some bills have passed through the House, weren't picked up by the Senate, and vice versa last year. Are those pieces of legislation still alive, or do you have to start from scratch this year?
We are starting from scratch, but a number of those bills were just taken down to bill drafting, given a new number, and quickly made available for filing. And so we'll be seeing a number of those assigned in the next week, and start moving with subcommittees, committee process on those bills.
And final question for you, personally, as a lawmaker starting your second term in Des Moines, what are your goals for this session?
Well, I really want to continue the work that I have been involved in. In my background, it's been quite a bit of involvement in mental health, development and disability services, early childhood, child care issues are something that I have experience with. So I'm going to continue in the Health Human Resources Committee in those areas. I've received a couple new committee assignments, economic growth and labor committees, so will be new to me. Those will give me an opportunity to delve deeper in those areas of law and issues. So I look forward to that opportunity to give me an opportunity to grow there. But it's putting the work in, making sure that we can come to an agreement with the majority of the lawmakers in the House, and get good policy to move forward and make a difference for Iowans.
All right, Mike, appreciate your time. Look forward to working with you throughout the legislative session.
Okay, well, thank you for your time this evening, and
Mike,
look forward to the session of communicating with you.
Mike Bergan, live from the House Chamber in Des Moines. Having our monthly conversation with Decorah School Superintendent Mark Lane. It's the second week of the new year, but I still think I can wish you Happy New Year. Is that fair there, Mr. Lane?
Absolutely. Happy New Year to you.
Let's look at what's going on. Obviously, the management of COVID-19 has been key to any faction of society, and education is no exception. You took the last 2 scheduled days in December and made them remote learning days. In the first week of January, you made them remote learning days. Have we had enough data and evidence to prove that that worked and your strategy worked one way or another yet, or are you still holding back, being the fact the holidays were 2.5 weeks ago?
No, I think we looked at our data last week and then again yesterday, and compared where we were at as we went into those 2 remote learning days before break. And I think we were successful in achieving what we wanted to achieve. I do see here this week in Winneshiek County that our rolling number of positive cases over that 14-day period has increased here. It had gone down last week slightly, and then there's a tick back up this week. We have not seen that yet reflected in our internal data, and I hope we can maintain that. Yesterday, across our system, staff and students combined, we were at 4 positive COVID cases that were out, and that's a low for us. We were experiencing maybe having 3 to 5 students and staff out due to a positive COVID case in October and early November, and then it slowly started to creep up. And we saw our highest numbers of people out actually with a positive test right leading into winter break. And so winter break came at a good time for us to have kind of hopefully a hit of the reset button. And so last week, and then as I said yesterday, what has seemed like a more manageable number of students and staff either quarantining or isolating. And, I think the things that we've been doing, mask wearing, and having as much physical distancing as we can. And then, I think the big key that I've tried to drive home with staff and students is those things, they're important when we're in school, but they're just as important when we're away from school. A huge majority of what has impacted our ability to have staff and students in the buildings has been related to what people have been exposed to away from school. And so just being consistent in those best practices, both while at school and then away from school, is really key.
And of course, the other night, Governor Reynolds, in her condition of the state address, made it a point to give maybe parents the option of having in-person classes or doing the remote learning or the hybrid learning, whichever you prefer at this time. Is it in your mind, is that a decision that should come down from the state, or should that be left up to a local district?
I guess, unfortunately, it seems like since all of this started with COVID, Iowa has always been, with our schools, we have always been a local control state. But it seems like that ability to be local control and focus on our school board and on our administrators, that has been eroded to me somewhat in the face of COVID. When local boards and when local administrative teams and communities have made decisions that maybe aren't aligned to what the governor and some of our legislators maybe want, that local control has been pushed back against. And I think we heard that in the State of the Union, or the State of the State address last night, maybe stronger than we've ever heard, of taking that local control and that decision making away. We had a really good conversation on Monday night during our board meeting with our local representatives, Representative Bergan and Senator Klimisch, and I felt like they were receptive to what our board had talked with them about, with why we've made the decisions we've made. I've had an opportunity to talk with Representative Bergan a couple different times since the beginning of the school year, and he has expressed appreciation for the communication that we've done as a district. So as I said in our board meeting on Monday night, I think, unfortunately, maybe some frustration with the Des Moines Community School District and districts around the Des Moines area, that's drawn a lot of attention from the governor and the legislature. And I hope that a good examination of what's really occurring across the state happens. Because in my mind, boards and school districts, I know the people that I talk to on a daily basis are really being thoughtful. They're taking in information, and if they can get kids into school in a way that they feel is safe and best for their community, they're doing that.
And it brings up the point that I've brought up with a lot of things related to COVID. It's seemingly an all or nothing end of things, because you talk to people, you talk to one end of the spectrum, we all should be wearing hazmat suits. The other end of the spectrum, we should live life as normal. Your district has taken a very methodical approach and kind of, in my mind, found that happy medium in managing this situation. Is part of the issue, and maybe this goes beyond education, is too many people in elected position wants to take the all or nothing approach instead of respecting the methodical, nuanced balance approach. Do you agree with that?
Absolutely right. I mean, it's not coming to me immediately right now, but right, I think it's a Teddy Roosevelt quote about the person in the arena, right? You can have an ideology, you can hold an opinion, but then get thrown in the fire. And actually have to make school happen on a daily basis. And there isn't just one right answer. You do have to take in a lot of information, and you have to think about, keeping students safe, keeping staff safe. Yep, absolutely, 100%. I'm an educator. I want kids in school. I first and foremost am a teacher. I loved being a fifth grade teacher. I loved being a school counselor and being in a classroom of kids and building community and getting to know kids and having relationships. And that's where I think the magic really happens. And so we want to do that, but we also need to be able to do that in a way that's safe. And so, the first time we went into remote learning, it was really, we were facing challenges with having appropriate staffing. And I think I've heard that from a lot of school districts, right? It can be related to, do we have the adults we need to operate safely on a daily basis? And so if we're taxing our system of employees, we may need to take a break and take a period of remote learning, not necessarily because of what's happening with kids, but with our capacity to do our job and do our work well. And so, as you said, I think we've tried to be methodical. We've tried to set to compartmentalize, let's get through this 2-week period. Let's get through this 2-week period, because circumstances can change quickly.
Mark Lane, Decorah School Superintendent, joining us. And one thing the state government did give you local control on is attendance at high school sporting events. What's going to be the Decorah district policy after the change in policy was announced last week by the governor?
I guess I would say we're maintaining a lot of what we had in place. When it was down to participants having the option of having two people in the gym, we worked with the NEIC to create a pass system and a ticketing system where we're having those available, and so we're maintaining that because we have those passes available and we're using that. What we have tweaked is now allowing and using a checklist system of households being able to come together. And so I believe it's up to 6 members from a household is what was decided by our conference, that we would have a check-in system. And so those passes then are going to also be able to then be handed out by our athletes to 2 additional folks. That could be friends, that could be a neighbor or someone outside their household that would allow to have some additional people in our gym. And so, yeah, the governor released proclamation language last Thursday, and we hosted an event the very next day on Friday. And I appreciate so much the work of Adam Riley, our activities director, and Kim Shepard, our high school principal. Mr. Riley very quickly was in communication with the NEIC other activities directors. They got together Friday, and I think throughout this, since football and volleyball and cross country in the fall, our conference has tried as best we can to create a consistent message, so it's not just vastly different approaches in our conference schools. And so I know one of the things we have to think about is, obviously different schools have different gym capacity. And so while our gym may allow for something, the gym in Olwine or Charles City might allow for something different. And so we've tried to be consistent, but also provide some flexibility. And so I believe right now we're at a household. I know we absolutely, by proclamation, we have to maintain that 6 feet of social distancing between household groups. People are required to wear masks. And so allowing that household to come and then allowing those passes to also then be available for students is where we're at right now.
Related to curriculum itself, I know the final part of the 1920 school year was obviously non-traditional from March on. This year has been a little bit different with a hybrid schedule and a little bit of remote learning this year. Is there a way that you have to judge from a curriculum standpoint to make sure that kids are holding up when it comes to the advancing educationally they need to do? Maybe I'm not phrasing this correctly, but is that something that you're looking at right now, and it has enough time elapsed to make a fair analysis of that?
I think we've done some initial things at the high school level. For example, we were really interested to see what would happen with our students' results with AP testing. We ended the year in remote learning. We parted ways with students being in the building right there in the middle of March. And so, our students that are involved in AP curriculum, they still took the AP test. And with that assessment and in those courses, we were pleased with how our students did. And I think maybe even a little bit surprised, thinking, gosh, this was a quick shift to remote learning. This was a big change for our students. We had some time to adjust for our teachers as well. And so we were pleased to see our students continue to do well on AP testing. Excuse me, at the high school level, I would say same thing with looking at our ACT results from our students that would have been involved in taking the ACT last year. We were, again, pleased with the results that we saw, as we entered the school year. Excuse me. We, at the elementary level, we administer a test called the FAST assessment, which is a early literacy assessment. And especially at our lower grades, we did see results that are not quite up to where we would want them to be and where they have been in years past. And so I think we're seeing that for our youngest learners, maybe that interruption, which set them back. And so we're needing to make some adjustments in kindergarten, in first grade, and some of our lower grades of making sure that we're really teaching those pre-literacy skills so that students are moving forward with their reading skills. And so some of those initial tests are, I think, painting a picture of, yep, we had some success, but yep, we've got some work to do. It'll be interesting here this spring. At this point, the state they haven't made a change. Last year we did not administer the Iowa statewide assessment of student progress, which gives us a comparison of our students to students across the state. And so we don't have that data from last spring. Right now, we're planning to administer that. The state is working with the provider of that assessment to have an online option, to have a paper and pencil option. And so hopefully as many students as possible, whether they're engaged in remote learning at home or in a building physically, they can take that assessment. Honestly, I don't think the Iowa statewide assessment of student progress, it isn't necessarily an assessment that gives us a lot of information about one individual student, but it gives us more of a picture of how are we doing as a system with all kids. And so I'm interested in seeing, what we learned from both the Iowa statewide assessment of student progress this spring, and then again with our AP testing, our ACT testing, some of those bigger systemic tests this year. But I think maybe in the summer when you and I talked a little bit, I think we're going to feel this for a number of years, right? Gaps in student learning, they may not become apparent until a couple years down the road, and we say, oh gosh, I noticed that with my own 5th grade son. The other night I was helping him with some math homework, and I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was like, oh gosh, did he miss out on this maybe last year? And because it felt like something, gosh, he should just do really quickly. And he was kind of looking at me like, I don't know what to do. And so it was an interesting just dynamic of, where I think we're going to see these things pop up for the first kids that have had this experience for the next few years.
And you mentioned that Iowa assessment of skill test that you mentioned.
Yeah.
Is that the old Iowa test of basic skills that old guys like me took?
It's the same principle. Okay. It is a new iteration. Yeah. So, back in the day, the color in the bubbles, it was the ITBS. So the Iowa Test of Basic Skills. And then they transitioned to another, and it just became the Iowa assessment. And then it's probably now been, I think this would either be the 3rd or 4th year. They went through a new iteration and it created a new assessment. Same company, it's still connected with Iowa testing program out of the University of Iowa, but it's now called the Iowa Iowa assessment, the statewide assessment of student progress.
A couple
the
more
ISAS now.
All right, a couple more questions here for Decorah School Superintendent Mark Lane. And Mark, one action your board did take the other night regarding refinancing of infrastructure bonds. District going to save some money with interest rates the way they are right now. You might as well take advantage, right? Yeah,
and that's some of that work, obviously that happens behind the scenes in a school district. And so a couple months ago, our business manager, Kathy Dietzenbach, and I, we were attending just an annual event with some financial consultants that work with Iowa schools. And it's just a great opportunity to talk. And a couple folks talked with us about let's look at and let's potentially either restructure or refinance some existing debt. And so we have 3 different bonds, one connected to our statewide sales tax money, one connected to our PEPL money, and then one connected to a debt service bond that, just as I'm sure many people are aware, right? I mean, it's beneficial maybe for you to refinance your mortgage at this time. The same environment that's creating that advantage can create advantages for us. And so we're restructuring and we're looking to refinance, and the board set a public hearing at our February meeting to move this forward. And based on estimations, interest rates can change, but based on where PFM financial advisors where they're looking at, I think we're looking, between $400,000 to $600,000 in savings over the next 5 to 7 years by refinancing. This won't change when we'll pay off the debt. One of the debts that we're paying off would end in June of 2024, one in June of 2025, and then the last in June of 2029. So those dates of paying that debt off won't change, but the savings based on interest rate will change because as we refinance. So yeah, always I think good, to bring savings to our district taxpayers and make sure that the taxes we do collect are primarily going into classrooms and making sure that learning is happening with kids.
Final question for you. You mentioned you had your conversation with Representative Bergan and Senator Clemish last week. From a school district perspective, what's on your wish list for the Iowa legislature this year?
The most important thing for school districts is what's referred to as state supplemental aid. So in our business, we refer to it as SSA. It's an annual adjustment to school district budgets. And so last night in the budget, what the governor proposed was a 2.5% increase to SSA, or state supplemental aid. I wasn't surprised by that number. I would hope for something more in the line of 3.75 to 4%. We've really been on about a 10-year path where our budget increase has really not kept up with inflation, and so our ability to manage our systems in school districts, it's honestly turning into a struggle. I think one of the things that we have faced this year is that is a result of that is with some of our support positions, things like special education associate positions, nutrition services positions. We've had people that have worked for us for a number of years who have taken jobs outside education. They can take a job where at a business in our community, and they can make $2 or $3 more an hour than they can make with us, and that hurts. That's hard on us because we value our people who are serving our kids, and we have to be in a position to remain competitive with the businesses around us to maintain a strong workforce. And so setting state supplemental aid at a way that allows us to make sure that we're remaining competitive with the private sector is really key for us. And so that's something that I can reach out and I can talk with our elected officials about that. But I think they take it more seriously when they hear from our constituents. It can be easy for them to come up with a mindset that, well, it's self-serving, I'm an educator. And so I think, why wouldn't I be asking for more money? But when it comes from parents, when it comes from our community saying we need to fund our schools, we need to make sure that we're providing the resources that our kids need and that our districts need. I'm working right now on a blog that will share with families. I did this last year at this time as well, kind of outlining why that's important for us, but I want to speak to that again to families this year. So I'll share that out with families here in the next few days as the governor has shared her budget, share kind of why I feel like that's important, and encourage people to reach out to elected officials to support Decorah schools.
Anything else we're missing? Anything else the public needs to know?
I guess I would just reiterate that we're needing to continue to just really be diligent and vigilant in our approach to reducing the spread of COVID. I heard yesterday as well that potentially educators are going to be in a next wave of vaccination, and I'm hopeful that starts to put us on a continued path towards being on the backside of this. But for our students, for our staff, for our families, just to continue to be really, really diligent about mask wearing and physical distancing and small social circles. We'll do our best to work with Winneshiek Public Health when that time comes to make sure that we're making vaccine available to our employees when it's our turn in line. But we'll continue to do the things that we're doing to be successful until then.
Mark, appreciate the time. Thank you.
You bet, Darren. Thank you so much. Appreciate your time too.
Decorah School Superintendent Mark Lane. Having a conversation this morning with Allamakee School Superintendent Jay Mathis as we begin a new calendar year today. And Jay, obviously the management of COVID has been topped on really every district's agenda, and really the numbers in the last report that came from your district showed some promising signs. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, we were holding our breaths after the holidays to see what would happen, and so far so good. We've had very low number of students out with any kind of absence with illnesses, and that's a great thing. So very few that have had positive test results or are being quarantined right now, and so hopefully that'll continue.
And being the fact that you have the absolute majority of your students actually in class and learning and getting that in-person instruction, that just collectively as a district, I'd imagine that makes it easier to keep that continuity going and keep everybody on the same level. Would you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it really is much better, and we had a lot of kids that were had opted to on their own learn from at home first semester that returned, and so that was good to see too, and that just makes teaching and learning easier for the teachers and the students.
And I know we talked in previous conversations that the biggest challenge that you would have is staffing issues if there was an outbreak among staff, whether it be teachers, custodians, bus drivers, etc. Have you been able to manage that to this point to the best of your ability?
Yeah, that's gone very well. There are some days where we might be short a sub for a paraeducator or for a cook, and there have been many days where the administrators, including myself, have gone in and helped serve lunches or whatever if they're shorthanded in the kitchens. But everyone has been pitching in and helping out, and right now we've got some college kids that are home that have been helping us coming in. They don't. Well, there's one of them that has sub-authorization that's been actually in classrooms, which is great, but most of them are just subbing for our paraeducators, and so as they start back to school, that'll leave us a little shorthanded, but we've been taking advantage of that, and things have, our number of faculty absences has been very low right now too, which is great.
Also related to COVID-19, the governor last week announced that there would no longer be state-mandated restrictions on attendance for high school activities. How is the Allamakee School District going to handle that, knowing the fact that the guidance is different from the state right now?
Yeah, we are allowing outside folks. We're not putting the limit as to 2 per family, or it got changed to then anyone in the household. And so we have opened our gym up to spectators here, whether they're grandparents or just Indian fans that want to come from both visitors and home fans. So we have opened that. We've had such good cooperation with folks on the mask wearing and the spreading out in the seating that we wanted to do our part and opening things up, and it's nice to hear more fan reactions to games and things, but people have been very cooperative with what we've asked of them, and we sure appreciate that.
Allamakee School Superintendent Jay Mathis joining us for this morning's conversation. And Jay, moving on past the COVID-19 issue, the Iowa legislature opening up this week. From a school district perspective, what would you say are the top items on your wish list for lawmakers this session?
Well, we're a business here in a sense of that we have to keep our finances afloat, and so we're always concerned with what kind of funding we'll have for the next calendar year and next school year, I should say, instead of a calendar year, is our fiscal year, which runs from July 1st to June 30th. So we'll be very anxious. But we certainly understand that there's a lot of uncertainty right now, and so we'll have to see what our state government decides they have for available funds and work with that. They've done a really nice job in the last 10 years of providing state funding to help reduce our local property tax burden, and so hopefully that continues as well, Darren. We are going to, with snow days, use virtual learning, and it'd be nice to have them at the state level give us some flexibility in the future, not just this year with the pandemic, but allow that to continue to happen, and also some calendar flexibility on start dates and things like that would be nice as well. So those are kind of the things that I'm hoping to hear something from.
And when you look at districts like your district in Allamakee County, there's a lot of square miles to cover. And a few years ago, the state legislature put in the transportation equity bill, basically allowing for more transportation dollars for the rural districts like Allamakee, like Howard Winneshiek, like Decorah, since they combined with North Wind. How big has that been, knowing the fact that you don't have to put as much general fund dollars into transportation as compared to what districts did maybe 5-10 years ago?
Yeah, that's a great point, Darren. It's been very helpful, and we haven't had to really, as they might say, rob Peter to pay Paul with that, and so it's allowed us to kind of get on an equal playing field with some of the smaller suburban districts in that regard. And so, yeah, that's a great point. I hope and feel like they will continue that, but nothing's certain, and that would be a disappointment, to say the least, if that extra funding went away.
Knowing the fact that managing COVID-19 and distance learning and learning models have taken up most of the conversation really since March of last year, are there any issues that, as a district, from a business perspective, that you've had to deal with that maybe haven't gotten a lot of attention over these last 9 months because the pandemic has brought up more pressing issues in the time being?
Not so much with business. I mean, yeah, you're probably right. There's probably a few things that when we talk about budgeting or contracts for next year is something that we've kind of not given a lot of thought to, but I don't think there's anything that's major. It has really forced us to focus on the academic side of things, which is good, and it's also provided us an opportunity to think about some of the practices we've had, and if there's some things that, if we quote ever get back to normal, that we might say, hey, this worked so well during a pandemic, we should continue doing this. So, I don't ever hope to go through something like this again, but it certainly has been a learning experience.
And you bring up the point of learning from this experience as well. You take any situation really in life, whether it be a positive situation or a negative situation, like dealing with a global pandemic, if you don't learn from it and improve, you're probably not moving forward as well as you should. What are the lessons that maybe education as a whole needs to learn from this situation to improve the delivery of education in the future?
Well, we certainly reinforce the idea that face-to-face is super important, but that there is a place for some of the online learning management systems for kids that maybe are, ill and at home, or are special needs students, or even are, regular education students, some of our best and brightest, that having some of the lessons posted online for them to view later is a good thing. And the ability to reach out and use Zoom and things like that are skills that I think will serve them well down the road. So I think we'll, once this is behind us, and hopefully it is at some point soon, I still think there's some of the strategies that have been used both in their classrooms and for students remote that we'll continue to work on and utilize.
Anything else the public needs to know on what's going on in the Allamakee Community School District?
No, we're thrilled that we got through the first semester without having to close down at all or go remote or hybrid. We're hoping we can do the same, but if for some reason that we can't, we'll make the most of that. We haven't had any snow days yet, but when we do, the announcement on the TV and radio will look a little different. It will probably just say that there's no in-person learning on today, that you'll learn remotely, and we won't have to make up those days. And so anxious to see how that works and plays out. Hopefully it's something that is successful and that, like I said, maybe we can continue to do in the future, and that the legislature will allow us to do that in years to come.
And related to that, I'll sneak in one more question. Has the district set a policy related to weather and virtual learning? Have you formalized a policy like that at all, or is it something that you're just planning to go with, that if Mother Nature tries to cause an interruption, you're going to say, well, nah, Mother Nature, we're still going to do our jobs?
Well, the board did approve the use of virtual learning to use snow days, but they also reserve the right to if it doesn't go very well, to reconsider that. We won't go back and say, oh, okay, these days we said we weren't going to make up, we are going to make up. We wouldn't do that, but there'd be plenty of notice that we'll keep those options open, or maybe if we have I'm a little nervous when we have a good spell, Darren, like this weather and nothing that, just a couple years ago, it was about January 21st was when we had our first snow day, and then we had 15 of them after that. So we'll see if we had a huge number like that, and our staff and families felt like our kids had fallen behind because they've missed too much in-person learning, that we might make some of those up. That certainly could be a possibility, but we're kind of taking a wait and see how it goes approach on that. So hopefully I've answered that question, Darren.
Oh, yes, you have. We appreciate you joining us once again, Jay. And by the way, if weather turns south here in a couple of weeks, I'll retract that last question from the record, so I won't be labeled as a jinx. But anyway, as always, we appreciate your time, Jay. Thanks for the update on the Allamakee Community School District, and look forward to talking to you next month.
Thank you, Darren.
Jay Mathis joining us, talking all things Allamakee schools. Our thanks to our guest on the program this week, State Representative Mike Bergan of Dorchester, Decorah School Superintendent Mark Lane, and Allamakee School Superintendent Jay Mathis. By the way, each and every week now, we are putting these shows on YouTube. We will link the YouTube link during the River Facebook page, so follow the River on Facebook at KMRV Radio or 94.9 and 99.1 The River. And you can watch our town if you ever miss a show. Our thanks to our sponsor, Decorah Bank and Trust. Our thanks to our guest, and our thanks to you for either watching or listening to 94.9 and 99.1 The River. This has been Our Town.